My name is Martha and I'm 28 years old. Growing up with my younger sister Beverly in suburban Ohio, I thought sibling rivalry was normal. She always seemed to get what I wanted, from toys to attention, but I never imagined how far she'd take it. Years later, standing at that altar, watching her sit alone in the back row, everything finally made sense. The library security footage had captured her desperate kiss attempt, and now she was witnessing her own karma unfold. Before we dive into this story of betrayal and ultimate justice, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you've ever dealt with family drama, and don't forget to subscribe, because this tale of sisterly sabotage will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about loyalty. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this revenge story plays out. Looking back now, I can see the pattern started when we were just kids, but at the time it felt like unfortunate coincidences. Beverly was 2 years younger than me, and we lived in a quiet suburb of Columbus, where everyone knew everyone else's business. Our parents always praised her as the social one, while I was labelled the studious one, which should have been my first red flag. The first real incident happened when I was 16. I had been crushing hard on Tommy from my chemistry class for months. He was this sweet, nerdy guy who always helped me with lab experiments, and I was sure he liked me back. We had been building up to asking each other to the school dance for weeks. Then 3 days before the dance, Beverly suddenly developed an interest in chemistry. She started hanging around after school, asking Tommy to explain concepts she claimed not to understand. I found them together by the lockers the next morning. Tommy looked uncomfortable as Beverly leaned in close, laughing at something he said. When he saw me approaching, his face turned red. "Hey, Martha," he mumbled, then quickly walked away. Beverly just smiled and said Tommy had asked her to the dance instead. She claimed she tried to turn him down because she knew I liked him, but he was so persistent that she felt bad saying no. My parents believed her story completely. They even praised her for being so considerate of Tommy's feelings. I spent that weekend crying in my room while Beverly went dress shopping with our mum, but that was just the beginning. Junior year, I had been paired with Kevin for our American history project. He was popular captain of the debate team and surprisingly funny once you got past his serious exterior. We spent weeks working together, staying after school in the library, and I genuinely thought we were developing something special. When he asked me to prom, I was over the moon. 3 days before prom, Kevin called to cancel. He stumbled through an awkward explanation about how he realized he had feelings for someone else and thought it would be wrong to take me when his heart wasn't in it. I respected his honesty, even though it broke my heart. The next day at school, I saw him walking down the hallway, holding hands with Beverly. Again, she had a perfectly reasonable explanation. Kevin had approached her after a student council meeting, pouring his heart out about how he had been too shy to ask her earlier. She claimed she tried to remind him about his commitment to me, but he said he would rather go alone if he couldn't go with her. Of course, she couldn't let him miss his senior prom over her, so she agreed to go as friends. They dated for 6 months after that. College brought new opportunities and new heartbreak. At Ohio State, I met Derek during my sophomore year. He was in my sociology class, and we were assigned as partners for a major research project. Derek was different from the high school boys I had known. He was thoughtful, ambitious, and treated me like an equal. We spent countless hours in the library together researching social inequality patterns. Our conversations ranged from academic theories to personal dreams, and I felt like I had finally found someone who truly understood me. Beverly was a freshman that year, living in a different dorm across campus. She rarely visited, claiming she was too busy with her sorority activities. But during spring semester, right when Derek and I were getting closer, she started showing up at my dorm more frequently. She wanted to meet my friends, she said. She was curious about my classes and my social life. I introduced her to Derek one evening when he came to pick me up for dinner. The three of us chatted for maybe 10 minutes in the lobby, just casual conversation about classes and campus life. Derek was polite, but not particularly interested, which actually made me happy. Finally, I had found someone who wasn't immediately charmed by Beverly's bubbly personality. 2 weeks later, Derek started becoming distant. Our study sessions became purely academic. He stopped calling just to chat. When I asked if something was wrong, he claimed he was stressed about finals and needed to focus on his grades. I believed him and gave him space, thinking we would reconnect after exams. I never saw Derek again after that semester. Later, through mutual friends, I learned he had transferred to a different university. Nobody seemed to know why, and he didn't respond to my messages or calls. It wasn't until years later that I pieced together what had happened during those 2 weeks when everything changed. Beverly had somehow gotten Derek's contact information and began messaging him privately. She convinced him that I was obsessed with him and had been telling people they were in a serious relationship when they had never even kissed. She showed him fake screenshots of conversations where I supposedly called him my boyfriend and made plans for our future together. She painted me as delusional and potentially dangerous. Derek, being a decent guy, didn't want to hurt my feelings by confronting me directly. Instead, he decided the safest option was to quietly distance himself and eventually transfer schools to avoid any drama. Beverly never dated Derek herself. She didn't want him. She just couldn't stand the thought of me being happy with someone who genuinely cared about me. After college, both Beverly and I ended up in Chicago. I got a job at a marketing firm downtown while she found work in fashion retail. We lived in separate apartments, but saw each other regularly for family dinners and holiday celebrations. By this point, I had started to notice the pattern, but I kept dismissing it as bad luck or coincidence. Surely my own sister wouldn't deliberately sabotage my relationships. That would be too cruel, too calculated, too insane. But deep down, I was starting to question everything about myself. Was I somehow choosing the wrong men? Was there something fundamentally unlovable about me that made these guys prefer Beverly? Instead, I began second-guessing every interaction, every conversation, every moment of connection I thought I shared with someone. The confidence I had built during college slowly eroded, replaced by self-doubt and a growing fear that I was destined to always be the less desirable sister. Everything changed when I met Marcus. It was a Tuesday morning at the coffee shop near my office, and I was running late for a client meeting. The barista had mixed up orders, and Marcus graciously offered to trade his vanilla latte for my black coffee with extra shots. He had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a gentle smile that made my stomach flutter in the best possible way. "I actually prefer black coffee anyway," he said, even though I could see the disappointment flash across his face when he tasted it. "Looks like you need the caffeine more than I do." We ended up chatting for 20 minutes about everything from coffee preferences to the challenges of working in creative fields. Marcus was a graphic designer who had recently started freelancing after years at a corporate agency. He understood the pressure of client deadlines and the satisfaction of bringing creative visions to life. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely excited about getting to know someone better. We exchanged numbers, and Marcus called that very evening, not texted, called. We talked for 2 hours about books, travel dreams, and childhood memories. He had grown up in Michigan, the oldest of 3 siblings, and had moved to Chicago for college before falling in love with the city. His voice was warm and reassuring, and I found myself laughing more than I had in months. Our first official date was that Saturday. Marcus picked me up at my apartment, bringing a small bouquet of wildflowers, because he remembered me mentioning that I preferred them to roses. We went to a little Italian restaurant in Lincoln Park, where we shared tiramisu and talked until the servers started stacking chairs around us. The next 3 months were the happiest I had been since college. Marcus was consistent, thoughtful, and genuinely interested in building something real together. He remembered details from our conversations, like how I took my coffee or that I was nervous about an upcoming presentation at work. He introduced me to his friends and included me in group activities without making a big deal about it. Most importantly, he seemed to genuinely enjoy my company and never made me feel like I was competing for his attention. We had started talking about meeting each other's families, and I was terrified, but excited to take that next step. Marcus had already met a few of my work friends and fit seamlessly into my social circle. Everything felt natural and right in a way that none of my previous relationships had. That's when Beverly started asking questions. At first, her curiosity seemed normal and sisterly. She wanted to know how we met, what he did for work, whether I thought it was serious. I was happy to share because I was genuinely excited about Marcus and wanted my family to be excited too. Beverly listened with apparent interest, asking follow-up questions about his background, his interests, even his appearance. "He sounds amazing," she said after I described our third date to the Art Institute. "I'd love to meet him sometime. Maybe we could all go out together. I could bring Craig." Beverly had been casually dating Craig for about 2 months. He was a real estate agent who seemed nice enough but didn't particularly excite her. She often complained that he was boring and too focused on work, but she kept seeing him because, as she put it, "He's reliable and treats me well." I thought a double date would be perfect. It would give Beverly a chance to get to know Marcus in a low-pressure setting, and I was confident they would get along well. Marcus was easy to talk to and had a knack for making people feel comfortable. Plus, having Beverly there would take some of the pressure off me to carry the entire conversation. We made plans for the following Saturday at a trendy gastropub in Wicker Park. I spent extra time getting ready, wanting to look perfect for what felt like an important milestone in our relationship. Marcus picked me up with his usual thoughtfulness, complimenting my dress and bringing a small gift for Beverly since it was their first meeting. When we arrived at the restaurant, Beverly was already there, sitting alone at our reserved table. She looked stunning in a red dress that hugged her curves perfectly, her hair styled in loose waves that caught the light every time she moved. "Craig had to cancel at the last minute," she explained with an apologetic smile. "Some emergency with a client. He felt terrible about it, but you know how real estate can be." Marcus was gracious about the change in plans, immediately putting Beverly at ease and asking thoughtful questions about her work in fashion retail. I watched proudly as my boyfriend and sister hit it off, sharing stories about design aesthetics and the challenges of working in creative, adjacent fields. But as the evening progressed, I started to notice things that made me uncomfortable. Beverly was touching Marcus's arm when she laughed at his jokes, leaning in closer than necessary when he spoke and steering the conversation toward topics that excluded me. When Marcus mentioned his love of photography, Beverly suddenly revealed a passion for modeling that I had never heard about before. When he talked about his college years, she discovered they had both taken similar art history classes and bonded over shared professors. I tried to contribute to the conversation, but every time I spoke, Beverly would interrupt with a related story or redirect the focus back to her connection with Marcus. By the end of the night, I felt like a third wheel on my own date. Marcus seemed oblivious to the dynamic treating Beverly with the same friendly politeness he showed everyone. When we said goodbye, he thanked her for a lovely evening and said he looked forward to meeting Craig next time. "She's wonderful," he told me on the drive home. "I can see where you get your charm from. You two must have been close growing up." Over the next few weeks, Marcus began to change. Our daily phone calls became shorter and less frequent. He started cancelling dates at the last minute, citing work deadlines or family obligations. When we did spend time together, he seemed distracted and distant, checking his phone more often and responding to my questions with one-word answers. I asked him directly if something was bothering him, if I had done something wrong, if the relationship was moving too fast. He assured me that everything was fine, that he was just dealing with some stress at work and trying to balance multiple client projects. I wanted to believe him, but my instincts were screaming that something fundamental had shifted. The truth hit me like a physical blow 3 weeks after our double date. I had decided to surprise Marcus with lunch at his favourite sandwich shop near his apartment. As I walked up to the entrance, I saw him through the window, sitting at a corner table with Beverly. They were leaning toward each other across the small table, her hand resting on his arm, both of them smiling in a way that looked intimate and secretive. I stood there for several minutes watching them interact with the easy familiarity of people who had been meeting regularly. This wasn't a chance encounter or a friendly catch-up between future in-laws. This was clearly an established pattern, a secret relationship that had been developing behind my back. When I finally worked up the courage to walk inside, their conversation stopped abruptly. Marcus looked guilty and surprised, while Beverly immediately launched into an explanation. "Martha, what a coincidence! I was just telling Marcus about this amazing art exhibition I heard about. I thought you two might enjoy going together." Her voice was bright and cheerful, but her eyes were calculating. Marcus stumbled through his own explanation about how Beverly had texted him with restaurant recommendations, and they had decided to meet up to discuss options for my upcoming birthday dinner. It was a reasonable story, but everything about their body language suggested there was much more to it. I played along pretending to believe their explanations, but inside I was falling apart. After a few minutes of awkward small talk, I excused myself and left them there together. Marcus called that evening to break up with me. He claimed he had realised we weren't compatible long-term and thought it would be better to end things now before we got more serious. He was kind but firm, refusing to give me specific reasons or agree to work through whatever issues he perceived. 2 days later, Beverly called with devastating news delivered in a voice full of fake sympathy. She and Marcus had realised they had feelings for each other. It had been completely unexpected, she claimed. They had tried to fight it out of loyalty to me, but the connection was too strong to ignore. She hoped I would understand and eventually forgive them both. When I confronted my parents about Beverly's pattern of stealing my boyfriends, they dismissed my concerns as jealousy and paranoia. They reminded me that I couldn't control who other people chose to date, and that Beverly couldn't help it if men found her more attractive or compatible. They suggested I focus on improving myself rather than blaming my sister for my romantic failures. For the first time in my life, I realised I was completely alone in recognising what Beverly was doing to me. Even worse, I was starting to doubt my own perceptions. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe I was jealous. Maybe there really was something wrong with me that made men prefer Beverly once they got to know us both. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't coincidence or bad luck. This was deliberate, calculated, and cruel. Beverly wasn't stealing these men because she wanted them. She was stealing them because she couldn't stand to see me happy. After the Marcus situation, I knew I needed proof before anyone would believe me. I couldn't keep going through life wondering if I was crazy or if my sister was systematically destroying my chances at love. So I decided to become a detective in my own life, documenting Beverly's behaviour instead of confronting her directly. I started by creating fake social media accounts to monitor Beverly's online activity. What I discovered was chilling. Beverly had been researching every man I dated, learning their interests, finding their social media profiles, and gathering information about their backgrounds, hobbies, and preferences. She knew more about Marcus after one evening than I had learned in 3 months of dating him. Her Facebook activity showed she had been liking Marcus's photos and commenting on his posts since the day after our double date. She had shared articles about graphic design and photography topics she had never shown interest in before. She had even joined a photography group that Marcus was active in, positioning herself as someone who shared his passion. But the social media investigation was just the beginning. I started reaching out to old mutual friends, people who had known both Beverly and me during high school and college. I approached these conversations carefully, asking general questions about their memories of our social dynamics, rather than making specific accusations. The stories that emerged painted a disturbing picture. Jenny, who had been in student government with Beverly during our senior year of high school, remembered Beverly spreading rumors about me being clingy and desperate whenever I showed interest in someone. She had convinced several people that I was obsessed with boys who barely knew I existed. Sarah, my college roommate, recalled Beverly visiting our dorm more frequently whenever I mentioned being interested in someone. She had always thought it was sweet that Beverly wanted to be involved in my life, but now she could see it had been strategic surveillance. Most disturbing of all was what I learned from Alex, who had worked with Beverly at a retail job during college. Beverly had openly bragged about her ability to steal any guy from any girl and had described it as a game she enjoyed playing. She had specifically mentioned using psychological manipulation to convince men that their current girlfriends were unstable or overly attached. The pattern extended beyond just romantic relationships. Beverly had interfered with my professional networking as well. At industry events, she had introduced herself as my sister, and then subtly undermined my reputation by mentioning my supposed emotional instability or relationship drama. Several potential business contacts had avoided working with me based on Beverly's carefully planted seeds of doubt. I began keeping a detailed journal of every interaction, every conversation, every suspicious coincidence. I documented the timeline of each relationship and Beverly's involvement. I saved screenshots of her social media activity and recorded phone conversations where possible. The breakthrough came during Christmas dinner at our parents' house. Beverly had been drinking wine throughout the afternoon, and by evening she was more relaxed and talkative than usual. She excused herself to use the bathroom upstairs, leaving her purse in the living room. I know it was wrong to look through her personal belongings, but I was desperate for concrete evidence that I wasn't losing my mind. Inside her purse, I found a small notebook filled with her handwriting. What I read made my blood run cold. The notebook contained detailed plans for sabotaging each of my relationships. Beverly had documented my boyfriend's interests, schedules, and vulnerabilities. She had written out strategies for approaching them, scripts for conversations, and timelines for when to make her move. But the most shocking entries were her honest reflections on her motivations. Beverly wrote openly about her hatred for my happiness and her need to prove that she was more desirable than me. She admitted that she didn't actually want these men for herself. She just couldn't stand the thought of me having something she didn't. One entry, dated just 2 weeks after she started dating Marcus, read, "Martha looked so pathetic when I told her about Marcus and me. She actually cried in front of Mum and Dad. I almost felt bad, but then I remembered how smug she looked when she thought she finally found someone who preferred her. She needed to be reminded of her place." Another entry from several months earlier described her college strategy. "The key is to make them think Martha is obsessed and unstable. Men hate clingy women, so I just need to convince them that's what she is." Derek was so easy to manipulate. He actually thanked me for warning him about her unhealthy attachment. Sometimes I'm amazed by how stupid people can be. Reading those words written in my sister's familiar handwriting felt like being punched in the stomach. This wasn't sibling rivalry or even jealousy. This was calculated psychological warfare designed to destroy my self-esteem and isolate me from potential partners. I took photos of the most damning pages before returning the notebook to her purse. For the first time in years, I had concrete proof that I wasn't paranoid or jealous. Beverly had been systematically sabotaging my relationships for over a decade, and she had been enjoying every moment of it. But I also realized that confronting her directly wouldn't accomplish anything. Beverly was skilled at manipulation and would likely convince our parents that I had invaded her privacy and was trying to frame her out of jealousy. I needed a different approach, something that would give her a taste of her own medicine while also protecting me from future sabotage. That's when I decided I needed to turn the tables completely. Beverly had spent years studying my relationships to destroy them. Now it was time for me to study Beverly and find her vulnerabilities. My investigation into Beverly's secret life began the following weekend at the Chicago Public Library downtown. I had always loved spending Saturday afternoons there, finding quiet corners to read and plan my week ahead. It was my sanctuary, a place where I could think clearly away from the chaos of work and family drama. I was settling into my usual spot in the literature section when I noticed a familiar figure hunched over a computer terminal in the reference area. Beverly was there looking nervous and secretive, completely absorbed in whatever she was doing on the screen. She kept glancing around to make sure no one was watching her, which immediately caught my attention. Beverly rarely visited libraries. Throughout high school and college, she had always preferred studying with friends or in social environments. She claimed libraries were too quiet and made her feel isolated, so seeing her there alone, acting suspicious, was completely out of character. I positioned myself behind a tall bookshelf where I could observe her without being seen. Beverly was intensely focused on the computer, occasionally printing documents and taking handwritten notes. She seemed completely unaware of her surroundings, which was also unusual for someone who typically thrived on social attention. After about an hour, Beverly packed up her materials and left. I waited a few minutes before approaching the computer she had been using, but the session had already timed out. However, I noticed she had left behind a small piece of paper with what looked like a work schedule written on it. Curious about this new behaviour, I decided to return the following Saturday to see if Beverly would be there again. Sure enough, at almost exactly the same time she appeared and settled at the same computer terminal. This time, I was better prepared to observe her routine. Beverly spent most of her time browsing what appeared to be staff directories and employee schedules. She printed several pages and spent time copying information into a notebook. When she finished with the computer, she walked through different sections of the library, apparently looking for someone or something specific. On my third weekend of observation, I finally understood what Beverly was doing. I watched her approach the reference desk in the rare books section, pretending to need help finding research materials. The librarian who assisted her was a tall, thin man with gentle eyes and greying temples. He wore a simple button-down shirt and seemed genuinely enthusiastic about helping her locate obscure historical texts. After Beverly left, I approached the same desk with a legitimate question about genealogy resources. The nameplate on the desk read, Leonard Morrison Reference Librarian. Leonard was patient and knowledgeable, spending nearly 30 minutes helping me navigate various databases and historical archives. He had a quiet, intellectual demeanour and spoke passionately about literature and historical research. When I mentioned that someone had recommended the rare books section to me, Leonard smiled and said he always enjoyed helping people discover new resources. We get a lot of regular visitors, he mentioned casually. There's one young woman who's been working on a project for months now. Very dedicated researcher. Over the next few weeks, I made a point of visiting the library regularly and getting to know Leonard through casual conversations about books and research. He was incredibly well read with a PhD in comparative literature and a particular expertise in 19th century American authors. He had been working at the library for nearly 8 years and genuinely loved helping people access information and resources. Through careful questioning, I learned that Beverly had been visiting the library consistently for almost 5 years, always timing her visits to coincide with Leonard's work schedule. She had claimed to be researching various academic projects, but Leonard had noticed that she never seemed to make progress on any specific topic. "It's a bit unusual," Leonard confided during one of our conversations. "Most serious researchers have a clear focus and build on their previous work, but this particular patron seems to start over with different topics every few months. She asks a lot of personal questions too, which isn't typical for academic research." I began to piece together the full scope of Beverly's obsession. She had been systematically learning Leonard's interest schedule and personal preferences for years. She knew his favorite authors, his coffee preferences, even his lunch break timing. She had memorized his work schedule and planned her visits accordingly. The revelation about Beverly's 5-year obsession was confirmed when my friend Janet, who worked in library administration, agreed to help me review security footage from recent months. Janet had access to the digital archives and was curious about the situation after I explained my concerns about someone potentially harassing staff members. The footage was eye-opening and disturbing. Beverly could be seen on camera visiting the library dozens of times over the past year alone, always when Leonard was working. She lingered near his desk, timed her research questions to extend their interactions, and even followed him to the staff break room on several occasions. Most shocking of all was footage from just 2 weeks earlier. The cameras had captured Beverly waiting in the parking garage after closing time, apparently trying to catch Leonard alone as he left work. When he emerged from the employee entrance, Beverly approached him and appeared to be having an intense conversation. The footage showed Leonard looking uncomfortable and trying to maintain distance while Beverly moved closer to him. Then, in a moment that made my stomach turn, Beverly suddenly lunged forward and attempted to kiss Leonard. The footage clearly showed him stepping back, holding up his hands defensively, and shaking his head before quickly walking away. Beverly stood there for several minutes afterward, apparently crying. Janet was horrified by what we saw on the footage. "This is stalking behavior," she said firmly. "Leonard needs to know about this pattern. He's been filing incident reports about feeling uncomfortable with this patron, but he didn't realize how extensive the surveillance has been." Armed with this information, I knew I had discovered Beverly's deepest secret. For 5 years, she had been obsessed with a man who had no idea who she really was, and no romantic interest in her whatsoever. While she had been systematically destroying my relationships, she had been desperately trying to manufacture a connection with someone who saw her as nothing more than a persistent library patron. The irony was almost too perfect. Beverly, who had spent years proving she could steal any man from me, couldn't get the attention of the one man she actually wanted for herself. Armed with the knowledge of Beverly's secret obsession, I found myself in an unexpected position. My original plan had been to somehow use this information against her to give her a taste of her own medicine by interfering with her pursuit of Leonard. But as I learned more about Leonard himself, my motivations began to shift in ways I hadn't anticipated. Leonard Morrison was genuinely fascinating. During our casual conversations at the library, I discovered we shared a love of classic literature, particularly the works of Edith Wharton and Henry James. He had insightful perspectives on social commentary in 19th century novels and could discuss character development with the kind of depth that comes from years of serious study. Unlike the awkward small talk that had characterized my early interactions with previous boyfriends, conversations with Leonard felt natural and intellectually stimulating. He listened carefully to my thoughts and opinions, building on my ideas rather than dismissing them. When I mentioned my work in marketing, he was genuinely curious about how narrative techniques from literature could be applied to advertising and brand development. Our discussions weren't limited to books. Leonard had travelled extensively during his graduate studies, spending a summer researching manuscript collections in Ireland and another conducting interviews with elderly storytellers in rural Scotland. He spoke passionately about preserving oral traditions and the importance of making historical documents accessible to the general public. What impressed me most was Leonard's genuine kindness and integrity. When elderly patrons struggled with computer terminals, he patiently guided them through each step. When teenagers needed help with research projects, he taught them proper citation techniques instead of just finding the information for them. He treated everyone with the same respect and attention, regardless of their age, background, or level of education. After several weeks of regular library visits, Leonard began to open up about the challenges of his job. He mentioned feeling uncomfortable with one particular patron who seemed to have developed an unhealthy fixation on him. He had tried to maintain professional boundaries, but the situation was escalating in ways that made him genuinely concerned for his safety. "She knows my schedule better than I do," Leonard confided during one conversation. "She times her visits to coincide with my shifts and asks personal questions that have nothing to do with research. Last week, she waited for me in the parking garage after closing. When I tried to leave, let's just say she made her intentions very clear in a way that crossed several professional boundaries." I realized Leonard was describing Beverly's attempted kiss, the incident I had seen on the security footage. He was clearly shaken by the experience and was considering filing a formal complaint or even seeking a restraining order. "The worst part," Leonard continued, "is that I think she's been gathering information about me for years. She knows things about my background and interests that I've never shared with library patrons. It feels like an invasion of privacy, even though technically everything she knows is probably available through public records or professional directories." Listening to Leonard describe the impact of Beverly's behaviour, I felt a surge of anger toward my sister that was different from anything I had experienced before. Beverly's sabotage of my relationships had been cruel and manipulative, but her harassment of Leonard was potentially criminal. She was making this kind, innocent man feel unsafe in his own workplace. Without revealing my connection to Beverly, I carefully shared what I had learned about the pattern of surveillance and stalking behavior. Leonard was grateful to know that someone else had witnessed Beverly's inappropriate conduct and that he wasn't overreacting to what he perceived as threatening behavior. "I've dealt with difficult patrons before," Leonard said, "but this feels different. More personal and persistent. I actually dread coming to work some days because I know she'll be here watching me trying to manufacture interactions." As our friendship deepened, I found myself genuinely caring about Leonard's well-being and wanting to protect him from Beverly's harassment. But I also couldn't deny that I was developing real feelings for him. Our conversations had evolved beyond casual library encounters into genuine intellectual and emotional connections. When Leonard mentioned that he enjoyed hiking and nature photography, I discovered we both loved exploring the forest preserves around Chicago. When he talked about his interest in cooking traditional Irish dishes, I shared stories about learning to bake bread during the pandemic. Our common interests felt authentic rather than manufactured, unlike Beverly's calculated attempts to mirror his hobbies. After 2 months of regular conversations, Leonard asked if I would like to join him for coffee outside the library setting. He was careful to clarify that it wasn't a romantic invitation, just a chance to continue our discussions in a more relaxed environment. Over coffee, Leonard revealed more about the extent of Beverly's harassment. She had been sending anonymous emails to his work account for months, sharing personal details about his life that she couldn't have learned through normal patron interactions. She had shown up at a photography exhibition where his work was displayed approaching other attendees and claiming to be his girlfriend. Most disturbing of all, she had somehow obtained his personal phone number and had been calling him late at night, hanging up when he answered. "I don't understand what she wants from me," Leonard said, looking genuinely confused and troubled. "I've never given her any indication that I was interested in anything beyond a professional relationship. I've tried to be polite but distant, yet she seems to interpret any basic courtesy as encouragement." I knew I had to tell Leonard the truth about Beverly being my sister, but I was terrified he would associate me with her behavior and end our friendship. After wrestling with the decision for several days, I decided honesty was the only way forward. "Leonard," I said during our next coffee meeting, "there's something I need to tell you about the woman who's been bothering you. Her name is Beverly, and she's my younger sister." Leonard's face went through several expressions as he processed this information: surprise, confusion, and then a dawning understanding as he began to connect the pieces. "I need you to know," I continued quickly, "that I had no idea about her behavior toward you when we first started talking. I came to the library because it's always been my favorite place to read and think. Meeting you was completely separate from anything involving Beverly." I explained Beverly's pattern of sabotaging my relationships and how I had discovered her obsession with him through my own investigation. I shared the security footage evidence and showed him photocopies of the notebook entries where Beverly had documented her strategies for winning his attention. Leonard listened without interrupting his expression, growing more serious as he realized the full scope of what had been happening. When I finished explaining, he sat quietly for several minutes processing everything I had told him. "I'm so sorry this happened to you," he finally said. "And I'm sorry your sister put you in the position of having to investigate her behavior. That must have been incredibly painful to discover." Leonard's response surprised me. Instead of being angry or suspicious, he was compassionate and understanding. He seemed more concerned about the impact of Beverly's behavior on me than on himself. "I want you to know," Leonard continued, "that everything between us has felt genuine and natural. I've enjoyed our conversations because you're intelligent, thoughtful, and interesting to talk to. None of that has anything to do with your sister or her behavior." Over the following weeks, Leonard and I continued to spend time together building a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine compatibility. He filed formal complaints about Beverly's harassment with library security and began documenting every inappropriate contact for potential legal action. Meanwhile, Beverly's behavior was escalating as she realized someone else had captured Leonard's attention. She started showing up at my apartment building, demanding to know who I was dating and whether I was trying to interfere with her relationship with Leonard. She seemed genuinely convinced that Leonard returned her feelings and that some outside force was preventing them from being together. The situation came to a head when Leonard asked me to be his girlfriend after 4 months of dating. By this point, our relationship had developed naturally into something deeper than friendship, built on shared interests, compatible values, and genuine affection for each other. When Leonard proposed 6 months later, I said yes without hesitation. I had found someone who valued me for who I truly was, who supported my goals and dreams, and who had chosen me freely without any manipulation or interference. For the first time in my adult life, I was in a relationship that Beverly couldn't sabotage because it was based on authentic connection rather than surface attraction. Leonard knew the truth about my family dynamics and had chosen me anyway. More importantly, he had experienced Beverly's manipulative behavior firsthand and was completely immune to her charms. The engagement was both a personal victory and a form of justice that felt more satisfying than any revenge I could have planned. Planning our wedding became a test of endurance as Beverly launched increasingly desperate attempts to sabotage what she saw as the ultimate theft of her man. Leonard and I had decided on a small ceremony at a historic mansion in Oak Park, followed by a reception in their garden pavilion. We wanted something intimate and meaningful, surrounded by people who genuinely supported our relationship. Beverly's first strategy was to insert herself into the wedding planning process under the guise of sisterly support. She called me repeatedly, offering to help with everything from dress shopping to venue coordination. Her suggestions all seemed designed to create chaos rather than assistance. She recommended vendors who were notoriously unreliable, suggested colour schemes that would clash horribly, and volunteered to handle crucial arrangements that I knew she would sabotage. When I politely declined her offers of help, Beverly escalated to emotional manipulation. She tearfully told our parents that I was excluding her from important family moments and refusing to let her participate in wedding preparations. Our mother called to lecture me about the importance of including Beverly as my maid of honor, reminding me that family should come first, regardless of past disagreements. "Beverly feels so hurt that you're shutting her out," Mum said during one particularly painful phone conversation. "She's your only sister, Martha. Don't you want her to be part of your special day?" I tried to explain that Beverly and I had fundamental trust issues that made it impossible for me to include her in intimate wedding preparations, but I couldn't reveal the full extent of her sabotage without seeming petty or vindictive. Instead, I compromised by offering Beverly a position as a regular bridesmaid while choosing my college friend Diane as maid of honor. Beverly accepted the bridesmaid role but continued pushing for more involvement. She insisted on hosting my bachelorette party despite my preference for a quiet dinner with close friends. She demanded input on menu selections and floral arrangements. Most disturbingly, she began asking detailed questions about Leonard's family and friends, claiming she wanted to make sure everything was perfect for our special day. Leonard, meanwhile, was dealing with his own challenges related to Beverly's continued harassment. She had somehow obtained our wedding date and venue information, probably through her conversations with our parents. She began calling the venue directly, claiming to be my wedding coordinator and requesting changes to our arrangements. The venue coordinator called me in confusion after receiving multiple contradictory requests from someone claiming to represent me. Beverly had tried to change our menu from the elegant dinner we had selected to a casual buffet. She had requested different flowers, altered the seating chart, and even attempted to add last-minute guests to our carefully planned, intimate gathering. "I'm not sure what's happening here," the coordinator said, "but we've received several calls from someone who says she's your sister and wedding planner. The requests don't match anything in your contract, and some of them would be impossible to accommodate at this late date." Leonard and I realized we needed to take protective measures to prevent Beverly from causing chaos on our actual wedding day. We hired additional security for the venue and created a list of authorized decision-makers that explicitly excluded Beverly. We also asked our wedding party and family members to redirect any questions or requests from Beverly directly to us. 3 weeks before the wedding, Leonard shared with me the most disturbing evidence yet of Beverly's escalating behavior. She had been leaving voicemails on his personal phone, which he had been saving as documentation for potential legal action. The messages started as congratulations on our engagement, but quickly devolved into desperate pleas and accusations. "I know she's manipulating you," Beverly's voice said on one recording. "Martha has always been jealous of me, and now she's using you to get back at me. You don't really love her, Leonard. You're just confused because she's been lying to you about who I really am." Other messages were even more disturbing. Beverly claimed that she and Leonard had a special connection that transcended normal relationships. She insisted that he was sending her secret signals during her library visits and that their brief interactions had been filled with unspoken romantic tension. "I've been waiting for you for 5 years, she said in one particularly heartbreaking message. "I know you feel the same way about me. Please don't make this mistake." call off the wedding, and we can finally be together the way we were meant to be. Leonard was shaken by the intensity of Beverly's delusions and the escalating nature of her contact attempts. We decided to involve law enforcement and filed for a restraining order based on the documented pattern of harassment and stalking behavior. The morning of our wedding, Beverly arrived at the venue looking disheveled and emotionally unstable. She had clearly been drinking and crying, her usually perfect appearance replaced by smudged makeup and wrinkled clothes. She cornered me in the bridal suite while I was getting ready, launching into a final desperate plea. "You can't do this, Martha," she said, grabbing my hands with surprising strength. "Leonard doesn't love you. He loves me. We've had a connection for years, long before you came along and poisoned his mind against me." Beverly's words were slurred and her eyes were wild with desperation. She had clearly convinced herself that Leonard returned her feelings and that I was somehow standing in the way of their destined romance. "I've been patient," she continued, "but I can't let you destroy both our lives like this. Leonard needs to know the truth about what you've done to keep us apart." I gently but firmly removed Beverly's hands from mine and called for Diane to escort her out of the bridal suite. Beverly didn't resist, but she continued talking as she was led away, muttering about how I would regret ruining everyone's happiness. The ceremony itself was beautiful, despite Beverly's presence in the back row. Leonard waited for me at the altar with such genuine love and happiness in his eyes that I forgot about all the drama surrounding our wedding. Our vows were personal and meaningful, reflecting the authentic connection we had built over months of honest communication and shared experiences. As I walked down the aisle toward Leonard, I caught sight of Beverly sitting alone in the last row, tears streaming down her face. Our parents had distanced themselves from her after witnessing her erratic behavior that morning, and other family members were clearly uncomfortable with her emotional state. For a moment, I felt a flash of pity for Beverly. She looked genuinely heartbroken and lost, isolated from the family celebration by her own destructive choices. But then I remembered all the years of sabotage, all the relationships she had destroyed, all the self-doubt she had deliberately cultivated in me. Leonard's vows included a line about finding unexpected love and learning to trust again after disappointment. As he spoke those words, looking directly into my eyes, I knew he understood the full significance of our journey together. We had both overcome manipulation and harassment to find something real and lasting. During the reception, Beverly left early without saying goodbye to anyone. Several family members approached me to apologize for her behavior and to express their support for Leonard and me. It seemed that Beverly's actions had finally opened everyone's eyes to the pattern of behavior I had been trying to explain for years. The wedding day ended with Leonard and me dancing alone in the garden after all our guests had departed. We talked about how grateful we were to have found each other, despite all the obstacles Beverly had tried to create. Most importantly, we had proven that authentic love based on mutual respect and genuine compatibility was stronger than any manipulation or sabotage. As we drove away toward our honeymoon, I felt a sense of closure and justice that was more satisfying than any revenge could have been. Beverly had finally experienced what it felt like to want someone desperately and be completely rejected. She had watched helplessly as the man she had obsessed over for 5 years chose someone else freely and happily. Our honeymoon in Scotland was everything I had dreamed it would be. Leonard showed me the ancestral village where his great-grandparents had lived before immigrating to America, and we spent peaceful days hiking through the highlands and exploring ancient castles. For 2 weeks, we were completely disconnected from family drama and free to simply enjoy being newlyweds. When we returned to Chicago, we discovered that Beverly had used our absence to have what appeared to be a complete emotional breakdown. According to our parents, she had been calling them multiple times daily, alternating between rage and despair about our marriage. She had stopped showing up for work and had been spending most of her time either crying in her apartment or driving aimlessly around the city. The crisis came to a head when Beverly's landlord called our parents after she had been missing rent payments and refusing to answer her door for welfare checks. When they finally gained entry to her apartment, they found Beverly in a state of severe depression, surrounded by printed photographs of Leonard and notebooks filled with obsessive writings about their imagined relationship. Our mother called me in tears, finally acknowledging the severity of Beverly's mental health issues. "I think she needs professional help, Martha," Mum said. "This goes beyond normal heartbreak or disappointment. She's created an entire fantasy world in her mind, and she can't seem to distinguish between reality and her delusions." Beverly was voluntarily admitted to a psychiatric facility for evaluation and treatment. The initial diagnosis included obsessive-compulsive disorder, delusional thinking patterns, and severe depression. For the first time in her adult life, Beverly was forced to confront the reality of her behavior and its impact on other people. The therapy process was long and difficult. Beverly's treatment team had to help her understand that her years of relationship sabotage weren't normal sibling rivalry, but deliberate psychological warfare designed to maintain control over my emotional life. They worked with her to recognize that her obsession with Leonard wasn't love, but an unhealthy fixation that had crossed into stalking and harassment. Meanwhile, Leonard and I were building our life together based on the solid foundation we had established during our courtship. We moved into a charming apartment near Lincoln Park, within walking distance of both the library where Leonard worked and my marketing firm downtown. Our daily routines felt natural and comfortable, filled with shared meals, evening walks, and quiet conversations about our hopes for the future. My confidence, which had been systematically undermined by years of Beverly's sabotage, began to return as I experienced what a healthy relationship actually felt like. Leonard consistently chose me, supported my goals, and treated me as an equal partner in our life together. There were no games, no manipulation, no wondering whether he really cared about me or was just settling until someone better came along. Professionally, my newfound emotional stability translated into better performance at work. I was promoted to senior account manager and began leading presentations and client meetings with a confidence I had never possessed before. My colleagues noticed the change, commenting on my improved leadership skills and more assertive communication style. 6 months after our wedding, Beverly was released from the psychiatric facility and began the process of rebuilding her life. She had lost her job and apartment during her breakdown, so she moved back in with our parents temporarily while attending outpatient therapy and looking for new employment. The first contact between Beverly and me came in the form of a handwritten letter delivered to our apartment. The letter was 5 pages long and represented what her therapist had described as a crucial step in her recovery process. "Dear Martha," the letter began, "I am writing this as part of my treatment program, but also because I genuinely need you to know how sorry I am for the years of pain I caused you. My therapist has helped me understand that my behavior toward you and Leonard was not just wrong, but actually criminal in some cases." Beverly's letter went on to detail specific incidents of sabotage, acknowledging the deliberate nature of her actions and taking full responsibility for the psychological damage she had inflicted. She admitted to lying to our parents about her motivations and to manipulating family members into enabling her behavior. "I know now that I was never in love with Leonard," she wrote. "I was obsessed with the idea of him, but I didn't actually know him as a person. I created a fantasy relationship in my mind and then became angry when reality didn't match my delusions. The truth is, I was using my obsession with Leonard as a way to avoid dealing with my own problems and insecurities." The most important part of Beverly's letter was her acknowledgement of the deeper pattern behind her behavior. I sabotaged your relationships because I was terrified of being left behind, she explained. Every time you found happiness with someone, I felt like you were abandoning me and proving that you were better than me. Instead of working on myself or finding my own happiness, I decided to make sure you couldn't be happy either. Beverly's letter concluded with a request for eventual forgiveness, but also an acknowledgement that she had no right to expect it. I don't know if you'll ever be able to trust me again, she wrote, and I understand if you never want to have a relationship with me. I just want you to know that I'm getting the help I need and I will never interfere with your life or happiness again. Reading Beverly's letter was emotionally complicated. I felt anger, sadness, relief, and even a small amount of hope that she might actually be changing. Leonard and I discussed how to respond, ultimately deciding that I would write back, acknowledging her apology, but maintaining clear boundaries about future contact. Over the following months, Beverly demonstrated genuine effort to change her life. She found a new job at a non-profit organization focused on mental health advocacy work that seemed to give her a sense of purpose beyond her previous focus on competition and manipulation. She continued therapy and began taking medication to manage her obsessive thoughts and depression. Our parents, who had finally acknowledged their role in enabling Beverly's behavior, also entered family counseling to learn how to support both their daughters in healthier ways. They apologized to me for years of dismissing my concerns and promised to maintain appropriate boundaries with Beverly while she continued her recovery. The first face-to-face meeting between Beverly and me took place 8 months after our wedding in a neutral location with her therapist present. Beverly looked different, more subdued, and genuinely remorseful than I had ever seen her. She apologized again in person, answered my questions honestly, and made no demands or requests for immediate forgiveness. I know I don't deserve your trust, Beverly said during that meeting, but I hope that someday, if I can prove that I've really changed, we might be able to have some kind of relationship as sisters. I miss you, Martha, and I miss the friendship we could have had if I hadn't been so sick and selfish. That meeting marked the beginning of a very slow and careful process of rebuilding some form of family relationship. Beverly and I now exchange emails occasionally and see each other at family gatherings, but always with clear boundaries and usually with other people present. She has never met Leonard outside of our wedding day, and we both agree that maintaining that separation is important for everyone's well-being. 2 years after our wedding, Leonard and I celebrated our second anniversary by returning to Scotland for a longer visit. We had begun talking about starting a family and were excited about the future we were building together. Our relationship had only grown stronger through weathering the challenges Beverly's behavior had created. The most profound change in my life wasn't just finding love with Leonard, but rediscovering my own worth and learning to trust my instincts again. Beverly's years of sabotage had convinced me that I was somehow fundamentally unlovable or flawed. Experiencing Leonard's consistent love and support helped me realize that the problem had never been with me, but with Beverly's deliberate interference. I learned that seeking justice doesn't have to mean seeking revenge. By marrying Leonard, I hadn't set out to hurt Beverly, but rather to protect and honor the genuine connection we had built together. The fact that it also served as a natural consequence for Beverly's years of manipulation felt like the universe finally restoring balance to our family dynamics. The experience taught me valuable lessons about the difference between love and obsession, between healthy competition and destructive sabotage, and between forgiveness and enabling bad behavior. Most importantly, it showed me that sometimes the best response to someone trying to control your life is simply to live authentically and let the natural consequences of their choices speak for themselves. As I sit here today writing this story in the same library where Leonard and I first met, I feel grateful for the journey that brought us together. Even Beverly's harassment led to something positive because it forced me to become stronger, more aware, and more confident in my own judgment. Looking back, I realize that Beverly's attempts to steal my happiness ultimately led me to the greatest happiness I've ever known. She thought she was ruining my life, but instead she inadvertently guided me toward the person I was meant to be with all along. The library security footage that captured Beverly's desperate kiss attempt with Leonard now serves as a reminder of how far we've all come. Beverly is learning to build genuine relationships based on mutual respect rather than manipulation. Leonard and I have created a marriage built on trust and authentic connection, and I've discovered that the best revenge isn't plotting someone's downfall, but simply living your life so well that their attempts to hurt you become irrelevant. Have you ever dealt with family members who seemed determined to undermine your happiness? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this tale of sisterly sabotage and ultimate justice resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more stories about overcoming toxic family dynamics. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that it's possible to find genuine love even after years of manipulation and betrayal. Remember, sometimes the people who try hardest to steal your thunder end up helping you discover just how bright your own light can shine. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it brings you comfort if you're dealing with similar challenges in your own family. Life has a way of bringing justice in the most unexpected ways, and sometimes the best thing you can do is simply trust the process and focus on building the life you truly deserve.